WarsawJS.
Hi, I'm Kuba. I'm right now Director of Engineering at ClickUp, and I was approached by Piotr to kind of give a talk. This will not be like a coding talk. It will be somehow technical talk, more like sharing talk. And I'm very grateful for that, especially that this is like kind of this big occasion. So let's go. A little bit about me. I'm actually really keen to see this space because I've spent a bunch of time at Google back in the south in Krakow a few years back. So this is great to see this being built into such a community. I know that the Google office here is like huge. Back there, I started as a developer, came through the kind of tech lead manager path. After a good few years, actually, I realized I got my dates wrong. I was like 10 years at Google, and then I moved to Spring, which was a New York startup that was creating a marketplace for fashion. Previously at Google, I was working on Google Shopping, so it was kind of sticking to the same domain, but I've changed to like very different size of a company, different pace, different like processes, approaches, and I really like that. The kind of the startup thing was really interesting, especially with the product that was kind of already gaining traction. Spring was acquired by ShopRunner like not long after I joined, and I've spent another couple of years there. We have built a site, engineering site in Poland of like 30 people there, and this was also a kind of very interesting experience. We are continuing to build solutions for like retail. All of that was for like US market. Both of those companies were like roughly 100 to 200 people size. ShopRunner was ultimately acquired by FedEx, so this became like 200,000 company out of a sudden. This was like no longer a startup, so that's why I ultimately decided to leave ShopRunner, and I joined ClickUp. In between these experiences, I've actually spent some time trying my own like startup, and I failed a few times. I don't want to spend time on those failures, but I do hope that kind of connecting all of those dots can help with having like some lessons, especially now based on like ClickUp, which is I think a fairly successful startup. So yeah, this is also about me. Like in the free time, climbing. I just wanted to kind of pitch you one picture. If any of you do not believe in like global warming, like this nice hut where I was like 2 months ago just kind of collapsed to the ground because the rocks that it was attached to kind of unfroze, and this is like almost at 4,000 meters. So this is very real. The other picture, like there is a hut here that 100 years ago was at the level of the glacier. So like we lost 100 meters of a glacier over that year. So I'm just kind of plugging this as just a fact that I think should all care about. I do know that like Google cares about that a lot. Okay, moving on. So ClickUp's mission is to save people time by making the work more productive. So there was this word like Jira used. ClickUp is being considered a competitor to Jira, which is true, but the mission is actually much bigger. Like we want to be replacing the many tools that people use and kind of one app to rule them all is the other motto. And this was like a short but like fairly successful journey. I only joined it recently, so I don't feel bad about like praising the company for like how successful it actually was. It was just founded like 5 years ago, and raised like 400 million Series C November last year. So it was like a short, very successful journey. And I basically do want to share a few observations that I have from like half a year there and how it compares to like the other startups that I have seen. So a few core values the ClickUp has, like with this one being the primary one, and kind of from there follows I think the approach to software engineering that we have at startup, which I want to discuss in kind of more details and the consequences of it. So there's like a bunch of info here that I don't want to go into details, but it kind of outlines the scale. Like for 5 years, almost 1,000 people. We are building a site in Poland. Half a year ago, I was like essentially employee number 1 in Poland. Right now, we have like 32 engineers in Poland, and we want to like grow further. We do have like a few groups there, and the product group is one that I'm part of. But again, like back year and a half ago, we had like 30 engineers. There were like no teams. So this is like a very rapid evolution, again, like with consequences to software engineering. A fairly like standard tool set. I think what's worth highlighting is that on both backend and frontend, we use like JavaScript and TypeScript. So like, this is, I guess, why it's also very relevant here. So this is kind of an aspirational slide, perhaps fairly standard, so you can kind of squeeze eyes and you will see like probably what is being advised to like everybody, how to build good software, how to kind of do layers, compose more like high-level services from the lower-level services. Like, this is great advice. You should all follow it. Unless you want to do, I think, something quickly. So that's kind of my point. We'll do it in a second. Like, ClickUp actually has not followed that like very closely. We have one big database still. We are like moving away from that, but we have like terabytes literally in a single Postgres instance that is a kind of interesting approach, but I think it was one of the ingredients of success, the ability to kind of connect all the data in one place. Specifically, again, like you don't need to read this, but like this is the data model that we have, and this is, I think, where my kind of title of the talk starts to come to the surface. So in an ideal world, we would have all those kind of red pieces be individual microservices and kind of have all those nice interfaces, have their own like data backends, kind of all the good principles. This is great, but and it would make like software the developers' life much easier. But I think again, like one of the ingredients of like ClickUp's ability to very quickly move with the user needs and kind of build features was kind of access to all of the data from like any place. So kind of breaking this principle of let's decouple the data, let's build the kind of nice domain-driven model of our like problem domain. We need to kind of get out of that like monolithic database, and we are doing that. Fortunately, now we do have like resources to build the foundation, to build the right solutions. But coming back to the kind of lessons that I think can be learned from like ClickUp and the approach to software engineering and this kind of early stage startup is that it was all about customer in the first place, and some let's call it like shortcuts that ClickUp has done initially. We're actually able to increase the development speed, and thanks to that, it was something that made it possible to kind of follow closely the user needs. So there are some like badges that ClickUp earned, but one thing that I want to like specifically pitch you, like KNIO is a platform where like you can gather user feedback, and in the early days, like this was kind of the oracle for the company to actually interact with the users to learn from them and address their needs like as quickly as possible. And therefore, like this kind of short-term development speed was actually more important than the elegance of the solution, that the tech that you acquired. Like we now have the market power to actually start paying down that debt. If we wouldn't get the product right, the user experience right, like we wouldn't be able to continue. So I kind of mentioned this monolith, monorepo, like a little bit provocatively that startups should start at monolith. I'm not like literally saying that. The concept of maybe like monorepo, but like better managed, Nest.js is one of the approaches that we only now start to use to actually break down the whole thing into more like manageable pieces, to separate things into libraries and like thoughtfully reuse the code. I would actually pitch that as maybe an approach which allows to combine the speed of development and combine the kind of future maintainability, ability to evolve, to bring like more developers, more teams without needing to like learn the whole code base. So like Nest.js is something that we have like started using, and I would really pitch to anyone like starting this journey. The next piece, again, like you don't need to like read the details here, but like this is a piece of our like ever evolving architecture. More like architecture of the infrastructure, or kind of the deployment structure, and all of that is has kind of grown organically. We could have been, I think, like much more thoughtful about like how we build binaries, how we deploy that to kind of share less code. This is like related to the monolith. With monolith, we had like much fewer choices. Should we embrace the more like kind of organized monorepo approach? We could have had all those like deployment units more thoughtful. So again, like the lesson for me is to monorepos are great. Like I've started with monorepo like at Google, but like it needs a lot of care, and Nest.js is a nice scalable way to get that. The other lesson that I'm kind of learning now is if you're developing a new product, new app, think about how it will work when it will be like scaled. So this is just an example of a simple regression of how our reporting jobs are performing, depending on the kind of number of ClickUp tasks that they need to look at. And as you see, like surprise, surprise, the more the tasks, the higher failure rate. And this is kind of obvious, but I wish ClickUp like a couple of years ago would have introduced some limits into like how much data users can put into like a single list. Right now we are kind of battling the problems that we could have prevented by kind of encouraging some usage patterns, even like putting some hard limits. And with an app that has like many users, many usage scenarios, I think it's good to think like when it's okay for it to like stop working, what should be the reasonable limit of when we can say like we do not support that use case. For each app, for each thing, it could be a different limit, but I do think it's useful to think about limits early on. And kind of as an extension of this, we actually in a journey to evolve our infrastructure, we've moved some stuff from Postgres, where SQL is very expressible. So especially with this data model that I've previously shown, like you can code almost anything. The problem is that when the database itself grows, when the user workspace grows, those things starts to break. The many joins that are being done maybe work for like hundreds of rows, but stop working for like hundreds of thousands of rows. So we're moving to DynamoDB, which is more like scale out solution for like data retrieval. And this is again, I think this is the right time to do that, but maybe we wouldn't have to do that at all if we had those limits. Now we know. Okay. Now we know which use cases are important, so we can kind of optimize the solution rather than using a generic solution like Postgres. And this is actually kind of almost a flashback. I witnessed when like Google also had like, let's say, imperfect solution to scaling. So we had like 90 instances of like MySQL, which was hosting all the ads data. We were like increasing the number of shards to just kind of scale. But then really the kind of the scale out solutions started to roll in. And if you can use them from day one, that's great. But if not, there probably will be time when you want to do that. Last lesson, I think it's also useful to be thoughtful about just the features. So again, like this is kind of a matrix of how we wanted to ourselves understand all the potential kind of combinations of possibilities and how we should report on them. The details are not important. The thing is that we had like challenges understanding all of the details. So like each feature you add to the product, each feature you kind of add to the user, you need to continue to support it. And in our case, it's really kind of increases exponentially the complexity. Having said that, like ClickUp was actually successful just because like having lots of those features. So it's a delicate balance. So that's actually it. Thank you.
Bravo, bravo. Wait, don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. I like the message of planning for growth and expansion. That's what I got from that whole thing. Plan ahead. Think it's going to be bigger. Think about scaling up. We're going to answer some questions. We have time for a few questions if anyone has any questions for Kuba. Got a question? Where? Oh, of course. This guy. Of course. Okay. Conrad, look alive. Hey, right here. Look. Good catch.
I work in tech.
Speaking to the mic. Yeah, that's it.
Hey, thanks for your chat. So I was wondering, how do you manage company culture with such rapid growth in headcount?
It's a challenge, especially that like ClickUp is actually a kind of remote first company. So we do have, I would say, a culture of like helping each other, kind of bringing people on board. But with those teams actually establishing themselves in the last year or so, it's almost less like there is some room for creating your own like subculture, I would say. On some extent, we want to do that like here in the engineering side in Poland, but we try to like have on one hand like some standard like Scrum ceremonies. We do want to have the kind of some like bonding within the team where based on retros, based on the interactions that we have to try to kind of collaborate to make these like processes better. This is challenging in the like remote first place, but I would say that I'm surprised that like somehow it works, that there is I would say the culture of like support, the culture of like being helpful to each other and being focused on kind of how we solve that for the customer.
Yes, communication is key. And some of you guys, I got to tell you, working in IT, oof, I've been exposed to developers and programmers for a couple of years, and yeah, communication can really be helpful. Anyone else got any questions for Conrad? Kuba, excuse me. That's Conrad. This is Kuba.
Can you hear me? My question is, what is the purpose of the establishing the Polish offices in Poland? Is it to localize, to make the localization? I mean that of the ClickUp. I mean to have the ClickUp in Polish, or the team of the Polish team will be involved in preparing the new the next version of the ClickUp, or just is to the sales team to find the new customers in Poland, to grow, or in the Eastern Europe region?
Good question.
So in our case, it's actually purely about like building the new engineering site. This is focused on the engineering product design charter. We do have like sales in centralized for Europe, like in Dublin and UK. We do have localization team that is working kind of, but not tied to the country. This is purely about like tapping into that talent pool that that we have in Poland, and given that the users are like across the globe, we want to have teams across the globe. So I did mention briefly like the 3 engineering teams we have, like infrastructure, platform, and core product. We have already like teams within each of those groups.
That was a great question. Thank you. Hold on one more sec. Anyone else have any questions for Kuba? I'm not going to throw it that far. I'll probably kill someone. Yeah, could you do that? Oh, you got one too.
I just wanted to ask about that mountain hut. Which mountains? What days?
So this is Col de la Fourche, Bivacco. So this was like 8-person unattended hut at like in the Mont Blanc Massif. That's a sad story.
One more.
Okay. Hello. So as I understood, your solution is kind of solving most of the problems of different companies. And I mean, for example, for the company, you need to pay for the Jira, pay for the teams, pay for other services, and basically you have everything in like one platform.
So that's the kind of future.
Is it legal?
Apparently, yes.
Hopefully, yes. Yeah. So this is a little bit of an aspirational goal, but I think we are still like we are already farther than many of the competitors. So like usually those partial solutions are focused on some group. So like you might have Jira for like engineering. You might have maybe Asana for some kind of task management. You maybe have like or like Salesforce or like Zendesk, all of those things. So these are like great tools. We want to build even better tools. We will not get there like within a day. I think where ClickUp shines today is that we enable like all departments to speak the same language, to like work within the same tool. We are kind of working towards, optimized handling of like all the nuanced use cases. For example, working on dashboards where we know that support for like sprint planning, all those reporting is not like so great So we want to like increase the quality at each place, but we already have a tool that many like small and medium-sized companies use kind of across the board, from finance to engineering.
Thank you very much. Everyone give a big hand to Kuba. Jeszcze raz. Kuba Rozkwitalski, tak?
Thank you.
Wow.